Hello, welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto. Have to apologize. There were some issues earlier today with the platform. It was not my fault. I actually upload videos often 12, 18 hours in advance. So it wasn't my upload. It was simply the downloading that was having problems, but that's beyond my control. So I will apologize for that, as only you can do when it's not your fault. But a couple things. First of all, I had somebody comment the other day and say, Steve, I like all your knickknacks, but quite frankly, are you an attorney? I'd rather see something that proves you're an attorney. So I decided that for the second time, I think, ever in the history of the show, I'm going to show you. There's the thing that says that I'm, in fact, an attorney in the state of Michigan, admitted in 1991. So whenever you hear me do the math and talk about how long I've been an attorney, I've been practicing law for about 27 years now. And that's because you can do the math back to that date, and that's this right here. I'm not going to leave it in the shot because, quite frankly, I think diplomas on walls are boring. They all look alike. And from a distance, you can't tell if it's, a license to practice law or a license to practice medieval barbery. So I do have a question, though, I need your help with. If I misuse a word on this podcast, people will have no problem jumping in and correcting me. And I'm going to talk about some of that in a later episode. I have a whole thing I want to do about hot water heaters. But Ari sent me a photograph that he took in a post office recently. And thank you for sending it to me, Ari. And he had a question because the photograph, you'll see, forbids you from going into the post office and loitering, and also forbids you from loafing. Now, here's the thing. As an attorney, I tend to look at signs and statutes, the actual laws on the books, very, very similarly. And in fact, if there's a sign on the wall of a government building, we hope there's some law that says, yeah, this sign is proper. And so if there is, in fact, a law that forbids you from both loafing and loitering in a public space, presumably it means you can't do either one. You cannot loaf, nor can you loiter, okay? But the problem is that in my mind, when I hear those two words, I think of them as being synonymous. In other words, am I not loafing when I am loitering? Or am I not loitering when I am loafing? And so, as I've pointed out in past episodes of Lehto's Law, when it comes to disputes on usage of the English language, my first go-to, if it's not a legal issue, but simply an English issue, I go straight to the Oxford English Dictionary, which today has a bookmark in it that I placed there not long ago on the page for the word loaf. And if you're not familiar with the Oxford English Compact, but it has 4 pages per page, and so you have to read it with magnifying glass and my reading glasses. But the word to loaf, in this sense, means to spend time idly, IDLY. You cannot spend your time idly, otherwise you would be loafing. So to spend your time idly means you're loafing. So you cannot go inside the post office and spend your time idly in there. But neither can you loiter. So the question then becomes, well, what does loiter mean? And loiter, I looked it up a minute ago, and I know it's in here somewhere. To loiter means to idle or waste one's time in idleness, which sounds a lot like loafing. And so the question is, did they really put up a redundant sign that says you cannot do this or this, even though this and this are the same? And this is actually a deeper question than you might think. And I apologize if you're not catching this. But when you read a statute or something that's written well, you have to assume that the reason you put two things on a list is that they're not the same. Okay? So if they are the same, it's redundant. And so the fact that there's two words means that by necessity, one of them must mean something else. And the question is, what is meant by loafing that is not included in the word loitering? Again, when courts, for instance, review a statute, and if they were to review this particular thing, they would actually use, as a rule of construction, the first thing you do is you look at the common usage, plain meaning, plain language. So the plain meaning of loafing is, to pass your time idly, and loitering is to pass your time idly. So they must not have meant that. They cannot mean to be redundant. They cannot mean to have extraneous language. So they must, by necessity have meant something else. Okay? So I think I've always thought loitering was simply hanging around someplace and doing nothing. Now, I'll admit, when I first thought of the word loafing in any context, there's some other connotation to it that strikes me as being different than loitering. Okay? But the problem is that generally when I think of people loafing, I think of people who are on the job but not working too hard. So I hired some kids to shovel my driveway, and when I said I'd pay them by the hour, I noticed they began loafing. Now, that makes sense to me. And I wouldn't say they began loitering because they're out there and they're out there for a reason. So they're not loitering, but they're loafing if they get lazy. But then you ask yourself, why would the post office prohibit you from not giving it your best when you're in the lobby of the post office? And again, I admit this is not the most complicated thing we're ever going to discuss on this channel. It's not even going to be the most complicated thing we discuss today on this channel. But I must ask you, if you yourself have an explanation as to why the post office, other than those are our tax dollars hard at waste, if there's a logical reason why a government agency would put on a sign, you cannot do this and you cannot do this. And the two words are loafing nor loitering. And they must have different meanings. And so the question is, what is the other meaning that they're getting to us with that sign saying you cannot loaf nor can you loiter? So if you have a solution for that, put it below. Otherwise, questions or comments, also put them below. And Ari, thanks for the sign. It befuddled and amused me as much as it befuddled and amused you. So thanks. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.